want to take advantage of this public opportunity here to get that out so they'll understand. Just so people understand the frame, we're going to talk about how that's done. The court may today to take action to say for the county clerk to go ahead and send notice to the Secretary of State's office. From there, and I'm going to let you discuss the procedures a little bit. If you come on forward to the microphone, please, ma'am.
Well, first of all, I do have to have the court's approval to go forward with this. The vote centers is basically on election day, like an early voting site, where anybody can go to that vote center and vote. You don't have to go to your precinct. You don't have to. You can just go to that vote center and vote, which will make things much more easier, especially if you live in Burke Burnett and you work in Wichita. If you get to vote that morning, you can just go to the vote center and vote. It will cut down. We can go to, I believe, 18. The first year, if we're approved and we have a successful run at it, we can have like 18. And then the next year, if they allow us to go ahead, if we were successful, then we could cut down some more. So we would cut down from 33 polling locations to the 18. So that would help staffing, finding judges, finding workers. You know, we have a problem with that every year, finding people willing to work.
This should actually make that process easier because the training will then apply to everybody. You won't have your early voting training and your election day training. They'll do the same. The first year, I believe, is 60%, and the second election cycle is in 50%, which I wish they wouldn't do that. That means you're going to drop a polling location or two from the previous year, and that's probably our biggest complaint, is that different polling locations. People think it's each year, but the difference is city elections don't always use all the same, and school board locations the same because not all of the election areas are contiguous with each other. There are differences.
Yeah, the cities can also apply for this. They
Yeah.
can go to vote centers.
And we're going to hope that ours might well do that. But at any rate, that's the plan. But we'll discuss that in more detail. And if people have questions, if they would direct those to Mrs. Bohannon, we'll all come up to speed on it. And it's a pretty straightforward concept. And it would still have the early voting centers like we're used to.
Yes.
And then on election day, you're going to have your example, whether I live in one city and work in another, it's more convenient on my work city to go to a location and vote. I can do that. I don't have to try to get off early and get back and stand in line. So
I think the biggest challenge, the biggest challenge we're going to have is finding locations that meet the criteria, you know, for the handicap and the parking and stuff like that.
Will there just be, because we have all of the voting, the 18, there'll just be more of those.
Correct.
Right.
We could just have more machines in those 18 locations.
yeah,
Voting machines.
the voting machines, the density, we bought enough this was in mind when we calculated the number of those machines. And one of the things that we've toyed with in the legislative session would be, and I think Lubbock County, who's been the leader in all this, is working on the idea. Right now, the machines we use in early voting have to be set aside and they can't be used on election day.
Correct.
Their goal is once you start early voting, those early voting polls will stay open all the way through election day. So you won't have that deal was, I plan to go the last Saturday before the election and guess what? They're closed. So now you would go and they would be the same. There'd never be a break, which is going to make some interesting things when it comes to early voting. Everybody, you know, looks at the early voting. So I don't know which way that would go. But that's the only thing I can see. We're all spoiled. We like to look at the early voting results, and the soothsayers will tell you however early voting goes is how the rest of the election is going to go. But with the new DRE equipment, you all had that whole election counted and finished. You were finished by 8:30, am I thinking right? With, yeah. So that's just a little more suspense. time, but I'm going to hope, to me, it seems like a horrible waste to have to set aside that much expensive early equipment and not use it in the regular election. And to have that break confuses people, so.
Lori, would you consider maybe mentoring our cities, especially Burke, on what you're doing and how you're doing it, and see if we can get them on board with that? Because it's going to be important that we're all on the same page.
Well, they'll be part of the committee. It's got some, it's the law designs that make up of that committee, and then give some latitude for special interest groups. And our goal will be to try to be as broad in the input of this as we can. Obviously, the political parties, representatives of each of the other voting entities, citizens, you know, I can see groups like the League of Women Voters, the other special interest groups that do not want to feel like their voters are disenfranchised. So
we have to have public meetings, you know, once we get this started.
yeah, it's a pretty prescribed process,
Yes.
not difficult. The one I couldn't figure out in looking at it is do they specify the reports you make at the end of the election cycle? I didn't see the detail on that. I was kind of curious if they had. I thought they'd probably have you fill in all the numbers and comments.
Basically, we do that anyway.
Okay.
It would just be probably a little different report, but we have to fill out all those reports anyway. That's why when people say, oh, well, election night's over with, you're done. No, we're still doing election stuff through December.
All right, then we'll take a short recess and sit down and go over this in detail. It is 10:50 now. Let's take 10 minutes and get back.